Siegfried the Swallow. Once upon a time, a pair of swallows lived in a beautiful valley near to the west coast of Scotland. The mama swallow was small and feisty and wild and had the kindest heart you could ever imagine. The papa swallow was strong and brave and loved mama swallow fiercely because she had the kindest heart you could ever imagine. One warm May evening, Mama and Papa decided they wanted to start their family. They searched up and down the valley to find a safe place to build a nest and eventually settled on a sheltered spot in the eaves of a house near a small burn. For days they carried mud, grass and feathers up to the roof of the house until eventually their home was ready for their eggs to be laid. That first year, they welcomed 8 healthy, happy chicks into the world in 2 sets of siblings. Mama Swallow's heart almost burst with pride at what they had achieved. This was the second of the little chicks they had hatched, and they had 4 beautiful chickens. From their second batch of chicks, they had 4 beautiful chicks almost ready to leave the nest. One night they were roosting near the eaves of the house by the burn when they noticed the rain was falling harder than they'd ever known before. The burn had swelled and burst its banks, and the field beyond the burn looked more like a lake than a field. Mama Swallow noticed that the sheep who usually lived and grazed in the field had been pushed right into the far corner up the hill and were huddled, bedraggled and sad looking near the fence. She peered through the dim light at her nest and hoped that her little chicks were warm, dry and fast asleep. She leaned in against Papa Swallow and let her eyes closed, looking forward to the morning when she would be able to dry her wings in the sun and help her babies by feeding them and gently nudging them to spread their own wings. When she woke with the sunrise, she knew that something was wrong. An eerie silence shook her from her sleep and she looked across to a sight that tore her heart in two. The nest had disappeared from the eaves. She shot like a bullet from the branch and across to the house, and without even needing to wake him, Papa Swallow was at her side. There, the nest was lying on the ground. The heavy rain had washed too much of the mud away for it to hold firm under the eaves, and it had tumbled into a patch of soft grass below, throwing the chicks out as it fell. Mama Swallow's heart filled with horror as she saw her chicks motionless on the ground. She screamed and screamed at them, hoping that they might wake, but after what felt like days, she was hoarse, exhausted, and still unable to wake them up. After a while, Papa Swallow encouraged Mama to return to their branch and rest. There she sat frozen in fear. He brought her food to try and help her build her strength, but she could not eat. In fact, she could barely breathe. Meanwhile, in the house, a gentle giant who went by the name of Steve had been woken by the sound of the crying outside. He hurried to the window to see what was wrong and felt a wave of shock and upset as he discovered that the nest had come crashing down. He rushed outside. There, dazed and scared, were the 4 baby swallows, ruffled, fragile but perfect. At first, gentle giant Steve just watched to assess the damage and distress. One by one, the baby swallows started to shake themselves and feel the warmth of the sun on their wings. The eldest, number 1, soon realising that his wings were ready to hold his weight, and with a deep breath and a lot of straining and determination, he fluttered, half flying, half tumbling away from his siblings onto the grassy bank and then away across the burn. His reunion with Mama and Papa Swallow on the ash branch was all it took to shake Mama back into action and to start to mend her heart. Soon she was away finding insects and doing everything she could to soothe her boy, fill his tummy and nurse him back to strength. Papa soared back to the house to see that baby swallow number 2 was following her brother's example. He swooped down to give her some encouragement as she shuffled, ruffled and shook herself into flight. Gentle Giant Steve had watched all of this with great excitement, but he also noticed that the two remaining baby swallows were struggling to follow and to venture into the great unknown. He wondered whether Mama and Papa might notice this and come back to feed them on the ground, but for some reason this didn't seem possible. After a while longer, and with one amazing show of strength, number 3 pulled himself onto his feet and took a run at the grass bank, fluttered into the air. Gentle Giant held his breath, muttered, "Come on now," under his breath, and was devastated to see the bird drop to the ground just short of the hedge at the bottom of the bank. Gentle Giant took a moment to think about what to do. In his head were all the warnings about never touching chicks. He took a deep breath and decided that not doing anything was not an option. He hurried over, scooped number 3 into his hand and transported him back to the safety of the grassy patch next to his brother. Once again, he watched and was frustrated to see that although Mama and Papa kept swooping across and low to see their babies, they did not come with any food and seemed unable to do anything to help. He looked up and began to hatch a plan in his head. He knew if he could recreate something close to a nest, that there might be a chance that Mama and Papa could feed their babies, and so he wandered back into the house to see what he might do. On the other side of the burn, Mama Swallow's heart sank as she watched him disappear. She did not know what magic this gentle giant had performed to help her babies, but she knew that without him, the two still on the ground had little hope. After a while, Gentle Giant Steve returned with his invention. He had brought a box with some paper and scraps of food inside and scooped number 3 and number 4 into it. He placed the box high up on a windowsill and fixed it so the babies would be safe and secure. For a while, the tiny birds just lay there, breathing and trembling and doing very little else. "Come on," muttered Gentle Giant Steve. "Don't give up now." He thought to add some of the grass, feathers and mud from the original nest, and with this, number 3 seemed to gain some strength, and before Gentle Giant Steve knew it, he was up on his feet and calling on the top of his chirp. Mama Swallow responded at once and swooped across with a fat insect in her beak. This was all it took for number 3 to make a spirited effort to launch himself into the wide blue yonder. In a flurry of legs, wings and desperate flapping, he too made it across to join the rest of his family on the branch. Back in the windowsill, and number 4 was so frail and sad looking that Gentle Giant Steve wondered whether the chick might just give up. He talked quietly to him and suggested he could give him a name. He thought about it for a while and soon decided this was Siegfried. Over in the branch where Mama was feeding number 3, she felt her heartstrings tug at the sound of a cry. She looked across to the house and spotted Siegfried, perched up high and calling as if his life depended on it. Without a moment's hesitation, she flew up into the sky to catch an insect and swooped over to feed it to her famished boy on the windowsill. She could not believe it as he took her gift and felt as if she'd been given a second chance. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she flew away and back again, with insect after insect, only hesitating from returning to Siegfried when she could see that Papa had gone to him. Mama tirelessly fed and fed, building Siegfried up and giving him more and more strength. At the same time, Papa Swallow had realised their nest needed to be rebuilt and had started to collect grass and mud and take them up to the eaves. He knew that they could come back better and that with luck they could make a stronger and safer structure for their next brood. Once she knew that Siegfried was well fed, Mama joined Papa in the rebuilding project. But she was soon reminded by Siegfried that he wasn't letting her go again that easily. He might have been small, frail and scruffy, but his cries for food and attention were fierce. She smiled at his tantrums and quickly let him know that she was there for him. As night began to fall, She tried to encourage him to spread his wings. He knew what he had to do, but each time he teetered on the edge of the box nest, he felt full of fear and anxious that his wings would not support him. The memory of falling after the rainstorm upset him, and he just couldn't make the leap. He fell backwards into the box and sobbed in desperation. Watching from inside the house, seeing the sun setting and realising it was getting cold, gentle giant Steve knew that he had to help out once more. He went and collected the box, muttering quietly to Siegfried that he would be safe till morning, and took him into a dark, quiet corner of the house. Siegfried settled into the deepest sleep he had ever known. When gentle giant collected the box and Siegfried at the crack of dawn the next morning, he was worried that perhaps the sleep was of the deepest kind possible. Siegfried was still and oh so quiet. Back on the windowsill, in the morning sun, something stirred him, however. Across on her branch, Mama Swallow saw gentle Steve place the box carefully on its perch and soared across to see her boy, a big insect ready in her beak. Hearing her close by, Siegfried shook himself back to life. Slowly and surely he started to feed again, guzzling whatever Mama and Papa brought to him, and all the time stretching and flexing his wings to check where it might be ready. And then a magical thing happened. For a short while, number 3 appeared by Siegfried's side. No words were spoken, nothing was done, but number 3 was there, just being, and waited. After a while, number 3 fluttered off again, back to the roost over in the branch with the rest of the family. Suddenly, a tingling feeling started to spread through Siegfried's little frame. It started in his toes and worked its way down to the bottom of his tail and up and out to the tips of his wings, and then he knew he was ready. He teetered to the edge of his perch, looked straight at his mama waiting with bated breath on the branch, and he flew.